The scar on her cheek, branded the night she was born, had always meant one thing: shame. But the second the wandering Alpha King touched it, the entire pack saw it begin to glow. The elder who condemned her as an infant watched in horror as the mark of disgrace transformed before his eyes. It was never a punishment, it was a prophecy, and the king had just arrived to claim it. For 22 years, that scar defined her life. It was a public brand, placed by the pack's highest elder, declaring her cursed and unworthy. But if it was always meant to be a sign of royalty, why was she told it was a punishment? And what did the elder have to gain by hiding the truth from an entire kingdom? This is the story of a lie that built a throne, and the destined queen who was raised to kneel. Her name was Alara, though most in the pack simply called her the Marked. From her first memory, the raised, silvery scar on her left cheekbone was a fact of her existence, like the color of her eyes. But while eye color was natural, this mark was a decree. It was administered by Elder Kaelin on the night of her birth, a ritual branding with enchanted silver that seared the skin and, according to pack law, the soul. The official record, read aloud at every moon gathering since she was a child, stated that her parents had committed a grave sin against the pack's covenant. Their punishment was death. Hers was to wear their shame forever, a living reminder and a permanent warning. She was raised in the shadow of the communal den, an orphan tolerated out of obligation but never embraced. Her chores were the lowest: mending fences in the freezing rain, scrubbing the butchering blocks, tending to the sickest Omega wolves who others feared to touch. She learned to move through life with her head slightly tilted, her hair a constant curtain over the left side of her face. The other young wolves were taught to see the mark, not the girl. It was a lesson in fear, a visible line separating the pure from the condemned. Elder Kaelin was the undisputed moral and political authority of the Grey Rock Pack. He was not the Alpha. That title belonged to a younger, more pragmatic wolf named Torin who handled border disputes and hunting schedules. True power, the kind that shaped beliefs and destinies, belonged to Kaelin. He was the keeper of histories, the interpreter of omens, and the sole arbiter of the pack's sacred laws. It was he who presided over the branding ritual for any transgressor. His word was considered the voice of the ancestors themselves, and for 22 years, his word on Alara was final. She was cursed, a drain on the pack's spiritual vitality, and destined for a life of atoning service. Any potential mate who showed her kindness would be warned off. Any spark of talent was redirected to mundane labor. Her place was fixed, immovable, and designed by Kaelin to keep her small. But here's the thing about a lie, even a sacred one: it requires constant maintenance. Alara began to notice the cracks. The mark didn't hurt, not like the stories said a brand of shame should. On the nights of the full moon, when the pack's magic was strongest, it sometimes felt warm, almost humming against her skin. Once, when she was 15 and cut her hand while fishing, a single drop of her blood fell onto the mark. For a fleeting second, the scar flashed with a light so pale blue it was almost white. She'd been alone, and she convinced herself it was a trick of the water and the moonlight. But the doubt was planted. The other crack was Kaelin himself. His eyes would linger on her mark not with disgust, but with something sharper, more calculating, like a banker checking the lock on a vault. He went out of his way to ensure she was assigned work far from any visiting dignitaries from other packs. When the annual Territory Council was held at Grey Rock, Alara was suddenly sent on a week-long foraging trip to the most remote part of the forest. It wasn't just shame, it was isolation. The pack, sensing their elders' unspoken anxiety, mirrored it back as cruelty. Her life became a cage of sideways glances and whispered jokes. The turning point, the event that set everything in motion, was not a dramatic rebellion. It was a simple accident of scheduling. The Northern Alpha King, a reclusive and notoriously powerful ruler named Theron, announced an unexpected tour of the border packs. His arrival was sudden, his agenda unknown, and it sent the Grey Rock leadership into a frenzy of preparation. Torin, the Alpha, focused on security and displays of strength. Elder Kaelin, however, looked genuinely panicked. He issued a swift, specific order. Alara was to be confined to the old watchtower on the northern ridge for the duration of the king's visit, for her own spiritual protection. But the king's convoy arrived a day early. The order came too late. Alara was in the central clearing, hauling a bucket of water from the well, her hair whipped back by a sudden gust of wind when the gates opened. The Alpha King's procession was silent, just 3 black vehicles and a handful of lethal-looking guards. King Theron emerged, and the entire clearing fell into a bow so deep it was palpable. He was taller than the stories, his presence a physical weight of ancient power. He acknowledged Alpha Torin with a nod, his gold eyes sweeping the gathered pack with detached interest. And then his gaze stopped. It passed over the kneeling elders, over the presented warriors, and locked onto the one person still standing upright, frozen beside the well, Ilara. His nostrils flared, the air, charged with submissive energy, crackled with a new, alarming current. Theron took a step forward, then another, cutting a direct path through the crowd as wolves scrambled to clear his way. He didn't look at Kaelin, who had gone bone white. He didn't look at Torin. He walked straight up to Ilara, who was trembling, clutching the bucket handle like a lifeline. The silence was absolute, suffocating. Theron reached out, his movements deliberate and slow. His fingers, calloused and strong, gently brushed the hair back from her face, tucking it behind her ear. The entire pack saw the mark of shame fully exposed under the midday sun. Theron's thumb traced the length of the silvery scar, and the moment his skin made contact, the mark began to change. The silvery scar didn't just glow. It transformed. Under the Alpha King's touch, the raised, jagged line dissolved like mist in sunlight, revealing a symbol beneath it that had been hidden for 22 years. It was a delicate, intricate crest, a crescent moon cradling a howling wolf, etched into her skin in lines of pure, shimmering light. A collective gasp ripped through the pack. This was no brand of shame. It was the sacred royal mark of the northern bloodline, the sign of a destined queen, and it had been on her face since the day she was born. King Theron's hand fell away, his gold eyes wide with a shock that mirrored the crowd's. He took a half step back, as if the vision before him was too bright to behold. "The veil mark?" he whispered, but his voice carried in the dead silence, a royal sigil hidden by a binding glamour. Placed at birth to protect the heir from enemies until the true king's touch awakened it. His gaze snapped from the glowing mark on Ilara's cheek to the ashen face of Elder Kaelin. "You," Theron said, and the single word was an indictment. The elder stumbled back, his veneer of holy authority shattered into pure panic. "A trick," Kaelin cried out, his voice shrill. "A demon's illusion. This cursed girl has somehow deceived even you, my king." But his eyes betrayed him, darting toward the woods as if calculating an escape. The pack, conditioned to obey his every word, now stared at him in dawning horror. The foundation of their reality, the story of Ilara's shame, had just been exposed as a deliberate, malicious fraud. Alpha Torin recovered first, his warrior instincts cutting through the supernatural shock. He moved to stand between the king and the trembling elder, not in defense, but in containment. "Explain this, Kaelin. You stood before this pack and named her parents sinners. You said the mark was a penance. You swore it by the old laws." Before Kaelin could spit another lie, Ilara spoke. Her voice was soft, shaky, but it cut through the tension like a knife. It was warm. All eyes turned to her. She was staring at her own reflection in the water of the well bucket, watching the ethereal crest gleam on her skin. The scar. It was always warm on the full moon, and once my blood made it flash. She looked up, her eyes for the first time in her life, holding the gaze of her alpha without flinching. "You hid me. You sent me away when important visitors came. This wasn't a mistake. You knew." Theron's rage, when it came, was not a roar but a terrifying sub-zero calm. The air temperature around him dropped sharply. A veil mark is used only in one scenario, when a royal birth must be concealed from a direct, imminent threat. It is the highest secrecy reserved for preserving a bloodline on the brink of extinction. He took a step toward Kaelin, and the elder crumpled to his knees, not by command but by sheer, overwhelming dread. "You did not place a mark of shame on an orphan. You placed a cloak of shame over a crown. You imprisoned a queen in a servant's skin. Why?" The truth, when it broke, came not from Kaelin, but from the oldest member of the pack, a bent-backed historian named Orwyn, who had watched everything with tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "Her parents," Orwyn croaked, pointing a bony finger at Ilara. "They weren't sinners. They were guardians. They fled the northern court with a newborn during the usurper's coup, the night the old king and queen were slain. They came here, seeking sanctuary in a distant, neutral pack." He turned his watery gaze to Kaelin, full of accusation. "You took them in, and then you murdered them for the bounty on the last heir's head, didn't you? But you couldn't bring yourself to kill a marked infant, feared the curse of killing sacred blood. So you hid what she was and made her pay for her own survival." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Ilara's legs buckled, but Theron was there, his arm around her shoulders, holding her up. The warmth from his touch didn't just steady her, it sent a current of pure, electric connection through her veins. The new mark on her cheek pulsed in time with her heartbeat, and she felt a corresponding pulse from him, a deep, resonant hum of power and recognition. The mate bond. It wasn't a subtle suggestion as it might be for others. It was a seismic lock, two continental plates slamming together after centuries apart. He was her destined king, and she was his hidden queen found in the most degraded corner of his kingdom. Kaelin saw the understanding in her eyes, in the king's protective stance, and he knew the game was over. His fear curdled into desperation. "She is nothing," he shrieked, scrambling backward. "A weakling raised on scraps. She doesn't know our ways, your court's politics. She will be a laughingstock and drag you down with her." His plea was a last vicious attempt to poison the well, but Theron just looked at Alara, really looked at her past the old frayed clothes, past the years of bowed shoulders, into the resilient fire that had kept her alive. "She survived 22 years of your tyranny," Theron stated, his voice rolling over the clearing with absolute finality. "She endured a lie meant to break gods. She carries my mark and my bond. That is the only pedigree I or my kingdom will ever require." He then addressed the entire pack, his arms still firm around Alara. "The Grey Rock pack has housed a treason of unimaginable scale. Your elder is a regicide and a usurper. By the ancient laws, his life is forfeit to the crown he betrayed." He glanced at Alpha Taurin. "You will keep him in your deepest cell until my guards collect him for formal execution. Your pack's fate hinges on your cooperation now." Taurin bowed his head deeply. "It will be done, my king. We were blind followers. We offer our lives in her service to atone." The pack, as one, followed their alpha's lead, going to their knees once more, but this time, the submission was directed toward Alara. The awe in their faces had replaced the contempt. The marked had become the monarch in the span of 5 minutes. But the shock was too immense, the shift too violent. Alara felt the world tilt. The glowing mark, the crushing weight of a stolen history, the terrifying intensity of Theron's presence, and the bond screaming between them. It was a tsunami on a soul prepared for a quiet drip of rain. Her vision swam, the faces blurring into a smear of color and sound. The last thing she felt was the king's arms tightening around her as the ground rushed up, and then everything went dark. She awoke in a room that was not her drafty attic space. The air was warm, scented with pine and clean linen. She was lying in a massive canopied bed in a stone-walled chamber within the Alpha's lodge, a room reserved for honored guests. The glow from her cheek cast a soft blue light on the wall. Sitting in a chair beside the bed, watching her with an unnerving stillness, was King Theron. "You're awake," he said, his voice quieter now, stripped of its royal command. "What happens now?" Alara asked, her throat dry. The question was about everything: her, him, the pack, the terrifying future barreling toward her. "Now," Theron said, leaning forward, his eyes tracing the luminous mark, "you come home. To a court that doesn't know you, to nobles who will challenge you, to a throne stained with your family's blood, which is now your blood, and you face it all, not as the marked, but as the queen who was forged in a lie." He reached out, his fingers hovering just above her cheek, not touching, but the bond between them vibrated like a plucked string. "But you won't face it alone." The moment was pierced by a frantic shout from outside the lodge, followed by the clash of steel. Theron was on his feet in an instant, his body angled between Alara and the door. Alpha Taurin burst into the room, his face etched with panic. "My king, the holding cell, it's empty. Kaelin is gone, and he took 3 of my most loyal enforcers with him." Taurin's gaze flickered to Alara, full of dread. He was raving before he fled. He said if he couldn't have control of the pack, then no one would have the queen. He's sworn to finish what he started 22 years ago. Kaelin's escape changed everything. The hidden threat was now a declared enemy in the wind, and his target was the newly revealed queen sleeping in the Alpha's lodge. Theron's response was instantaneous and brutal. He didn't shout. He issued orders in a clipped, frozen tone that brooked no argument. His personal guards, who had been a silent perimeter, materialized inside the room. "Secure the queen. Sweep the woods." He cannot have gone far. But Kaelin, it turned out, had planned for failure for 22 years. The cell was empty because he'd spent decades secretly hollowing out a tunnel from its stone floor, a patient project of paranoia. And the 3 enforcers who vanished with him weren't just loyalists. They were his illegitimate sons, a secret he'd kept even from the pack. They were fanatics, raised on his bitter sermons and a shared, hidden identity. This wasn't a retreat. It was a cell of true believers going to ground. Theron turned to Alara, all traces of his earlier softness gone, replaced by the grim focus of a wartime general. "We leave for Obsidian Peak immediately. My compound is a fortress. You will be safe there." Alara pushed herself up, the strange new weight of the bond a constant hum in her chest, both comforting and overwhelming. "Wait. My things, the pack." "You have no things that matter," Theron said, not unkindly, but with a finality that stung. And this pack is a crime scene. Every face you see was complicit in your imprisonment, whether they knew it or not. Your safety is the only priority. But a stubbornness, forged in years of silent endurance, flared in her. They were lied to, same as me. And I won't slink away in the night like I'm still ashamed. She met his gold eyes, the mate bond giving her a courage she'd never known. I will say goodbye. To the forest, to the graves of my parents, if I can find them, and I will walk out of here as a queen, not a fugitive. Theron studied her, and a flicker of that proud predatory smile returned. 5 minutes, he conceded. With my guards at your side, we are not safe here. Those 5 minutes were a whirlwind. Elara didn't go to the attic. She walked to the edge of the clearing, to the old gnarled oak where she'd spent countless hours hiding as a child. She placed her palm on its bark. The mark on her cheek flared softly, and to her astonishment, the tree's ancient spirits seemed to answer, a gentle rustling acknowledgement in her mind. The land itself recognized what the pack had been blinded to. On her way back, she was intercepted by Orwin, the old historian. He shoved a small, leather-bound journal into her hands, his eyes urgent. "My life's work," he whispered. "The true history of the usurper's coup, and the names of the northern nobles who backed it. Kalen didn't just want you dead. He was paid to keep you hidden. The conspiracy that killed your parents, it never ended." The revelation was a second bomb, broader and more terrifying than the first. Her persecution wasn't just one evil elder's doing, it was a syndicate's investment. Before she could process this, a young Omega woman, Lena, who Elara had once nursed through fever, darted forward and pressed a small carved wolf figurine into her hand. "For luck, my queen," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Then she added so quietly only Elara could hear, "The elder's sons, they took weapons from the sacred armory. Silver-tipped arrows. They're not just running, they're hunting." The move to depart became a military evacuation. Theron's guards formed a tight phalanx around Elara. Alpha Tauren provided his fastest vehicles, but as they were loading up, a chilling howl echoed from the dense tree line to the north, not a natural sound, but a twisted, mocking rendition of the pack's rallying cry. It was Kalen. He wasn't hiding. He was announcing himself. He was saying he owned these woods, and he was watching. The convoy sped away from Grey Rock, but the atmosphere inside Theron's armored vehicle was tense. Elara clutched the journal and the figurine staring out at the blurring pines. Theron was on a satellite phone, his voice low and deadly. "I want a full lockdown at Obsidian Peak. Assume hostile actors have been monitoring Grey Rock for years, and dig up everything on the usurper's coup. We're not cleaning up a past mess. We're walking into a present war." He hung up and looked at Elara. The journal. What did Orwin say? She told him, the words feeling heavy and unreal. He said Kalen was paid. Theron's jaw tightened. "That changes the calculus. If a faction in my own court financed your suppression, then your appearance isn't just a happy ending, it's a direct threat to their power. They will have contingencies." He reached over, his hand covering hers. The contact sent a bolt of calming energy through the bond. "You are the rightful heir. Your existence invalidates the current power structure that rose from the coup. We are not going home to a celebration. We are going to a battlefield." The journey was long, crossing state lines into the rugged terrain of Theron's territory. He used the time to brief her, a crash course in werewolf geopolitics. The Northern Territory wasn't just a pack, it was a network of allied packs, a corporate empire with holdings in energy and defense, and a sovereign nation with a hereditary monarchy. The Council of Elders who advised him was made up of alphas from the 5 founding families, families whose loyalty had been bought with blood and promises after the coup. "They will test you," Theron said. "They will use your upbringing, your lack of formal education, the very shame Kalen painted on you, as weapons. They will try to provoke you, to make you look weak or hysterical, so they can argue the bond is a mistake, that you are unfit." Elara listened, her fear hardening into a cold, sharp resolve. "I've spent my life being tested by a master. I know how to stand still under pressure." As they climbed higher into the mountains, the landscape grew more severe and breathtaking. And then, as they rounded a final cliffside pass, Obsidian Peak rose before them. It was not a rustic lodge. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture and ancient power, a compound of steel, glass, and dark stone built into the very face of the mountain, overlooking a glacial lake. It looked less like a home and more like a command center for a god. The gates, 20-foot-high reinforced titanium, slid open silently. The convoy ascended a spiraling road lined with guards who knelt as they passed. The scale of it was dizzying. This was the seat of the power she was supposedly born to. The pressure in Ilara's chest tightened, but it was now mixed with a fierce, rising determination. This was the stage. Kaelin had been the opening act. They were greeted in the grand entrance hall, a cavernous space with a waterfall flowing down one wall. The staff and high-ranking pack members were assembled, their curiosity poorly masked by formal bows. At the front stood a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of unshakable competence, Mara, Theron's beta and chief of security. "Welcome home, my king," Mara said, her gaze immediately snapping to Ilara, assessing, calculating. "The lockdown is in effect. All perimeter sensors are active." She then bowed her head to Ilara, the motion precise but not deep. "My queen, we have prepared quarters for you." Theron didn't let Ilara go to prepared quarters. He took her directly to his private war room, a tech-heavy space with maps and live surveillance feeds. "Mara," he said, "the threat is not external, it's internal. The Grey Rock Elder was a hired knife. The hand that held it is likely here, in this mountain." Mara's expression didn't flicker. "Understood. I'll begin a discreet review of all financial ties and communications of the founding families for the last 25 years. She paused. "The council has requested an audience. They say it is urgent. They've heard rumors." "Of course they have," Theron said, a cold smile on his lips. "Schedule it for tomorrow. Let them stew. Let them see her first at the formal gathering, not in a private panic." But the council's move was faster and more brutal than anyone anticipated. That evening, as Ilara was trying to settle into the opulent, unfamiliar suite adjacent to Theron's rooms, Mara returned, her face like stone. She held a tablet. "My king, my queen." A data packet was just anonymously released on the Secure Pack network, its footage, from Grey Rock. She played it. The video was shaky, taken from a hidden phone. It showed the moment in the clearing from a distance, but the angle was manipulated. It showed Theron touching Ilara's face, then cut to the glowing mark, but the audio was overdubbed with Kaelin's voice, spliced from old sermons, ranting about demonic magic and illusions. The packet included fabricated medical records suggesting Ilara was mentally unstable, and a forged statement from a pack psychologist detailing her lifelong delusions of grandeur. The accompanying text was a masterstroke of venomous PR. It didn't deny the mark. It twisted it. It asked, did the Alpha King discover a queen? Or did a powerful, lonely king become besotted with a damaged, imaginative orphan and use ancient magic to create a mate for himself, violating the sacredness of the bond for his own desires? The attack was brilliant. It weaponized the very miracle of her revelation. It didn't require the conspirators to prove she wasn't the heir. It just had to sow enough doubt in the pack's mind to make her legitimacy a controversy instead of a fact. It turned Theron's protective love into a potential scandal. Theron stared at the screen, a lethal quiet settling over him. This was the contingency he'd feared. The conspiracy was striking first from the shadows with human-style media manipulation. Ilara felt the blood drain from her face. She had prepared for sneers and direct challenges, not a smear campaign that poisoned her story at the source. Mara broke the silence. The council is now demanding an emergency session tonight. They claim the pack's stability is at risk. The rumor is spreading like wildfire. Theron looked at Ilara. The battle for the throne was no longer a future event. It had begun the moment they walked through the door, and the first shot had been fired not with a silver arrow but with a keystroke. The hidden war was out in the open, and the first fight would be one of perception, not strength. Ilara straightened her spine, the glow from her cheek reflecting in the dark glass of the window. The girl from the attic was gone. The queen in the mountain fortress nodded. "Then let's go and meet our council." The council chamber at Obsidian Peak was a theater of carved obsidian and cold judgment, and its 5 ruling elders were waiting like wolves at a gate. They did not rise when Theron entered with Ilara. This was a calculated breach of protocol, a silent declaration of war. The eldest, a silver-haired alpha named Cyrus, with eyes like chips of flint, spoke first, ignoring Ilara entirely. "My king, these rumors are a cancer. This spectacle from a backwater pack jeopardizes decades of stability. We must address it now." Theron didn't take his seat at the head of the table. He stood behind Ilara's chair, his hands resting on her shoulders, a solid, unmovable weight. "There is no rumor. There is only your queen. You will address her with the respect her birth and her bond commands." Cyrus's lip curled. "Respect is earned, not conjured with pretty lights. We have seen the video. We have heard the testimony of a respected elder alleging deceit. The bond itself is under question. How convenient that the king finds his mate in a nobody from a disgraced pack, at the very moment political tensions rise." Elara felt Theron's rage simmer through the bond, but she placed a calm hand over his. She stood, facing Cyrus. Her voice, when it came, didn't echo in the chamber, but it carried with a quiet, penetrating clarity. You don't question the bond, Elder Cyrus. You fear it. Because a true mate bond with the rightful heir shatters the convenient story you've all told yourselves for 22 years, that the old bloodline died, and your power is absolute. She reached into the folds of the simple tunic she still wore and placed Orwyn's leather journal on the polished obsidian table with a soft thud. The true story is in here. Names, dates, payments. Including a monthly stipend from a northern mining syndicate owned by your family, Cyrus, to an account held by Elder Kalen of Grey Rock. Payment for ongoing containment services. Would you like me to read the entries? The chamber went perfectly still. Cyrus's face turned to granite. The other elders shifted, their eyes darting between the journal and their implicated colleague. The smear campaign had just been met with hard evidence. This is a fabrication, Cyrus hissed. It is a historian's life work, Elara countered. And it matches the memory of the land itself. She turned her head, letting the glowing royal mark on her cheek catch the light. This didn't just appear, it was revealed, by the king's touch, yes, but the magic was always there, placed by my true parents, hidden by a traitor you paid. You didn't just want me hidden, you wanted me broken, so that if I were ever found, I'd be too damaged to be a threat. You failed. One of the other elders, a woman named Anya, spoke, her tone less hostile, more probing. And what would you have us do, girl? The pack is restless. Your sudden appearance creates a crisis of succession. It ends a crisis of illegitimacy, Theron growled. But Elara had an answer. She had spent the journey thinking not of revenge, but of structure. The council remains, she said, surprising everyone, including Theron. But its power shifts from heredity to merit. No more seats held solely by founding families. One seat will be elected by the warrior class, one by the artisans and hunters, one by the omegas and caretakers. The old bloodline doesn't mean I rule alone. It means I am the safeguard, the final check on power becoming poison. My first act as queen will be to ratify this new charter. The proposal was a masterstroke. It called the bluff of the elders who claimed to care about stability. It offered the discontented pack members a real voice, and it isolated Cyrus, whose power was built entirely on old money heredity. Anya slowly nodded, a spark of respect in her eyes. The other elders, seeing the wind change, began to murmur agreement. Cyrus saw his coalition crumbling. In a final, desperate move, he slammed his fist on the table. This is treasonous fantasy. I call for a trial of the blood. If she is truly of the old line, let her blood open the vault of the first moon. No trick of light can fake that. A shocked silence fell. The vault was a legendary sealed chamber within the mountain, said to open only for a drop of blood from the direct descendant of the first northern king. It was a myth to most, a deadly dare. If she failed, her legitimacy would be destroyed utterly. Theron began to refuse, but Elara spoke. I accept. The procession to the vault was solemn. The entire pack gathered in the deep, geothermal cavern where a massive, seamless door of unknown metal was set into the rock, covered in faint, glowing runes. According to lore, a rightful heir's blood would make the runes blaze and the door unlock, revealing lost histories and treasures. Cyrus smirked, confident in his victory. Theron held Elara's hand, his warrior thrum in the bond. Elara took a ceremonial silver dagger offered by Mara. She pricked her fingertip. A single drop of blood welled up, shimmering with a faint gold light in the cavern's gloom. She pressed it to the center of the metal door. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Cyrus's smirk widened. Then, a low hum vibrated through the stone under their feet. The ancient runes flared from a soft glow to a blinding, brilliant blue-white. Lines of light raced across the door, forming the same crest that was on Elara's cheek. With a sound like a deep sigh, the massive door slid sideways into the rock, revealing a chamber beyond. But it wasn't filled with gold or weapons. It was a tomb and a library. 2 stone biers lay in the center, upon which rested the perfectly preserved bodies of a king and queen, her parents. And surrounding them, floor to ceiling, were scrolls and books, the complete, unedited history of the Northern Line, which the usurpers had tried to erase. The pack fell to its knees, not in submission to power, but in awe of truth. Cyrus staggered back, his face ashen, his authority irrevocably shattered. Mara's guards moved to flank him. Elara walked into the vault, Theron at her side. She approached her parents, tears finally streaming down her face, not from sorrow, but from closure. The mark on her cheek blazed in sympathy with the runes on the walls. She was home. The aftermath was swift and just. Cyrus was stripped of his title and imprisoned for conspiracy and treason. The new council charter was drafted and ratified within a week, with Anya as its first elected head. The pack, witnessing the vault's miracle and the promise of real reform, rallied behind Alara with fervent loyalty. As for Kalen, his hunt ended not with a battle, but with bitter irony. Theron's trackers found him and his sons 2 weeks later, starving and half-mad in the wilderness. The very forests he claimed to own had rejected him, the game animals fleeing his scent, the streams drying up along his path. He was captured without a fight, babbling about curses. Brought before the new council, he was sentenced not to execution, but to permanent exile in the human world, stripped of his wolf, a fate worse than death for a creature of magic. He would live a long, mundane life, haunted by the crown he tried to bury. Months later, Obsidian Peak was no longer just a fortress, it was a home. Ilara stood on the same balcony, the royal mark now a constant, soft glow on her cheek, a badge of identity, not a brand. Theron wrapped his arms around her, his chin resting on her head. The elder thought the mark was a curse to make me small, Ilara said softly, watching the northern lights dance over the mountains. But it was a shield. It protected me until I was strong enough to be found. Theron turned her in his arms, his eyes reflecting the aurora above. It wasn't just a shield, my love, he whispered, a secret smile on his lips. He gently traced the crest. The magic of the veil mark, it doesn't just hide, it prepares. It attunes the bearer to the land, to the ancient magic. Your strength, your resilience, your connection to the forest, that wasn't just you. It was the mark, nurturing the queen inside the servant girl all along. Kaelen didn't just fail to break you, he was accidentally training you for the throne. The final revelation was a gift. Her suffering had not been meaningless. The shame had been the cradle for her power. She was not just a survivor of a lie. She was its masterpiece. Theron kissed her, and the bond between them sang a perfect, endless note of home. The scar was gone. The queen had risen. And a kingdom built on a lie had finally found its truth. Alara's story is more than a fairy tale. It's a blueprint for how the most powerful truths are often hidden in plain sight, disguised as flaws. For 22 years, everyone saw a scar of shame. Only one person, the one who placed it, knew it was a crown. It makes you wonder, what else have we been taught to see as weakness that is actually dormant strength? What stories have we accepted without question because the authority figure who told them seemed unshakable? Elder Kalen's greatest mistake wasn't greed or cruelty, it was underestimation. He thought shame was a cage that would keep her small forever. He didn't understand that pressure applied over decades doesn't always create a fracture. Sometimes it forges a diamond. The very symbol meant to break her spirit became the key that unlocked her destiny the moment the right person, the destined person, recognized it for what it was. So the next time you see a mark, a story, or a person that the world has labeled as less than, pause. Question the source of the label. Because the most profound transformations often begin not with a change in the thing itself, but with a radical shift in perception. One touch, one moment of true recognition, can turn a lifetime of shame into a legacy of power. If this journey from the attic to the throne resonated with you, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that their current circumstances don't define their destiny, and subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell, because we break down a new story of hidden power and stunning reversals every single week. Let me know in the comments below, what's one flaw you've seen transformed into a strength? I'll see you in the next